The Great Molasses Flood of Cactus Creek. Howdy, folks, and welcome back to the channel. Gather around the campfire, because today I've got a real knee-slapper of a tale for you. Straight from the dusty trails of the Old West. This here is the story of the Great Molasses Flood of Cactus Creek, starring two of the bravest, boldest, and perhaps clumsiest young cowboys you'll ever meet. Dusty Boots and his best pal, Billy Bean Parker. Now, Dusty and Billy weren't your average Dusty, you see, had a hat that was 2 sizes too big, which often flopped down over his eyes at the most inconvenient moments. And Billy, well, they called him Bean because he was skinny as a green bean and could wiggle his way out of just about any tight spot. Their greatest ambition in life was to be known as the finest rodeo champions in the whole territory. The only problem, they didn't have a horse. Their prized possession was a stubborn old mule named Clementine, who had a mind of her own and a particular fondness for snoozing in the shade. Every day, Dusty and Billy would try to practice their rodeo skills on poor Clementine. Dusty would try to rope her, but his hat would fall over his eyes, and he'd end up roping a cactus instead. Billy would try to ride her, but Clementine would simply lie down for a nap, leaving Billy sitting in the dirt, looking rather puzzled. It was a sight to see, I tell ya. One sweltering afternoon, Mayor Mildred of Cactus Creek announced the town's annual Founders' Day picnic. The main event was a baking competition, and the grand prize was a shiny new saddle. The most beautiful saddle Dusty and Billy had ever laid eyes on. It was made of fine leather, with silver concos that sparkled in the sun. That saddle, they reckoned, was their ticket to rodeo stardom. If they had that saddle, surely Clementine would be so impressed she'd start acting like a proper rodeo steed. The logic was ... Well, it was their logic. The problem was, neither Dusty nor Billy knew the first thing about baking. But Mayor Mildred's prize-winning recipe was famous throughout the county. Her legendary molasses sticky buns. The recipe was a closely guarded secret, kept under lock and key in the town hall. Dusty and Billy hatched a plan. It was a daring plan, a bold plan, and a slightly ridiculous plan. They were going to borrow the recipe. That night, under the cover of a sliver moon, our two heroes tiptoed into town. Billy, being the bean that he was, shimmied up a drain pipe and slipped through an open window in the town hall. He found the recipe box, but just as he was about to grab the secret recipe, he heard a noise. It was Sheriff Gus, making his nightly rounds, whistling a jaunty, off-key tune. Billy panicked. He grabbed a random card from the box, stuffed it in his pocket, and shimmied back down the drain pipe faster than a lizard on a hot rock. Back in their secret hideout town, old abandoned prospectors, Shack they looked at the card. It wasn't the recipe for molasses sticky buns. It was the town's bulk order form for the general store. And at the very top of the list was a 10-gallon barrel of extra sticky, super sweet molasses. Dusty's eyes lit up. "Billy," he said, his voice full of a sudden, brilliant idea. "We don't need the recipe. We just need the main ingredients. We'll make our OWN sticky buns. How hard can it be?" The next morning, they borrowed Clementine and hitched her up to a rickety old wagon. They rode to the general store and, using their combined savings of 3 shiny nickels and a very interesting-looking button, they managed to convince Old Man Withers, the storekeeper, to let them have the giant barrel of molasses. They promised to pay him back with their prize money. Old Man Withers, who had a soft spot for their shenanigans, just shook his head and helped them load the barrel onto the wagon. The journey back was where the trouble really started. The road to their shack was bumpy. Very bumpy. With every jolt, the big barrel of molasses wobbled and sloshed. Dusty was holding the reins, but his hat, as usual, kept slipping over his eyes. "A little to the left, Dusty!" Billy would yell. "No, your other left?" But it was no use. They hit a particularly large pothole. The wagon gave a mighty lurch, and the barrel tipped over. The lid popped off, and a thick, golden brown river of molasses began to pour out, oozing all over the wagon and onto the dusty road. "Whoa, Clementine! Whoa!" Dusty yelled, but Clementine, feeling the sticky goo on her hooves, decided she'd had enough. The wagon careened down the path, leaving a sticky trail of innovations in its wake. Chickens, pigs, and even Sheriff Gus's prize-winning poodle, Fifi, got stuck in the syrupy mess. The whole town of Cactus Creek was slowly but surely coming to a standstill. Dusty and Billy, now covered head to toe in molasses, looked at the chaos they had created. It was a sticky disaster. People were stuck to benches, hats were stuck to heads, and the tumbleweed was rolling down Main Street, growing larger and stickier with every rotation, collecting dust, feathers, and a stray wanted poster. Just when they thought things couldn't get any worse, Mayor Mildred appeared, her hands on her hips and a very stern look on her face. "Dusty! Billy!" she boomed. "What in the name of Sam Hill is going on here?" Before they could answer, Sheriff Gus waddled over, his boots making squelching noises with every step. "I'll tell you what's going on, Mayor," he said. "We've got ourselves a greater, top-level, sticky situation." Dusty and Billy knew they were in deep, deep trouble. But then, something amazing happened. The townsfolk, instead of being angry, started to laugh. First, a little chuckle from Old Man Withers, who was stuck to his rocking chair. Then a giggle from the blacksmith, whose hammer was glued to his anvil. Soon, the whole town was roaring with laughter at the sheer absurdity of it all. They were all stuck together. Seeing everyone laughing, Dusty had another one of his brilliant ideas. "Hey everyone," he shouted. "It's not a disaster. It's a party. A sticky party." He started sliding down a small, molasses-covered hill, letting out a whoop of joy. Billy joined in, and soon, the kids of Cactus Creek were all slipping and sliding in the molasses. It was the messiest, stickiest, and most fun Founders Day the town had ever seen. Major Mildred, seeing the joy on everyone's faces, couldn't help but smile. She declared the first ever Cactus Creek Sticky Festival an official town tradition. As for the baking competition, she awarded Dusty and Billy the grand prize saddle, not for their baking skills, but for their unparalleled ability to bring the community together, albeit in a very sticky way. With their brand new, shiny saddle, Dusty and Billy felt like they were on top of the world. They polished it until it gleamed and placed it proudly on Clementine's back. And you know what? That stubborn old mule, seeing that magnificent saddle, stood up a little taller. She gave a little snort of approval and, for the first time ever, trotted around the corral like a true rodeo champion. Dusty and Billy never did win a major rodeo, but they became local legends. They were the boys who turned a disaster into a celebration, the creators of the Great Molasses Flood, and the proud owners of a mule who finally decided to cooperate. And every year, the town of Cactus Creek would celebrate their sticky situation with laughter, games, and, of course, plenty of Mayor Mildred's famous molasses sticky buns. The real ones, this time. Thanks for tuning in for our tale today. If you enjoyed the story of Dusty and Billy, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more Wild West adventures. Until next time, keep your hats on tight and stay out of the molasses.